Now for our first speaker, who really does not need an introduction. John Holland has been writing papers and studies for years. He says he is an engineer, and so is Victoria. They like to fix things. They like to come up with answers. And when he read the GAO report and found that it was fraudulent, he wrote his paper, and then he contacted them. And they were going to stick by it. And so he went ahead and published his report. And he is one of the most important people we have, not just as a witness. As you know, they had hearings down in New Mexico when they wanted to open that slaughterhouse, and John's testimony was invaluable. And I believe Paula Bacon also has a letter on record. If you want testimony, if you want people to prove the case against horse slaughter, you want Paula Bacon and you want John Holland.
Well, first of all, let me just say that my niece is an Episcopal priest. And at our family get-together, she was, which is every 4th of July, she was asking me what it would take to get me back to church, which I hadn't been to since about 7. But anyhow, and I said, you know, I've thought about that ever since, and now I've decided if she can convince me that heaven looks like this place, I'm back and I'll be tithing. Well, I think most of you are aware of the fact that the European Union banned the Mexican horse meat in December. Is everybody pretty much aware of that action? And we've all, of course, been wondering what the effect of that would be. The EU ban was announced on the 10th. It actually was decided, I think, on the 4th of December. And they basically said, we've given up on Mexico, and for the foreseeable future, we don't believe that Mexican horse meat is safe, largely because the horses were coming across the border with EID documents that were totally bogus. Recently, just in the last few days, one of our researchers, I'll show you in a second, uncovered a document dating to 2009, which was a free trade document between the EU authorities and the Mexican government, in which the Mexican government admitted that there was no way on earth that the EID documents were accurate or that they could guarantee what was in the horses, or that they could in the future get it under control. And it took 6 years. Now, why did it change it all? It changed it all because of Anne Marini's paper. It wasn't that they didn't know it. They knew it, but they didn't know we would know it. And once that paper came out, that changed it. So we decided to try to start an investigation. Obviously, the first phase was to look at the past and anticipate what might happen. So the first was to look at recent historical trends. We put out a paper in which we said what the trends had been and what we thought might happen. Then we did a physical observation at the Eagle Pass with our crack team of 2 undercover investigators, which I'll introduce in just a second. And then we did a follow-up study on the data. This is the most in-depth study we've ever done because we have more resources than we've ever done, thanks to somebody in this room that won't be mentioned. But and help from a new researcher. But first of all, recent historic trends. You need to understand the kinds of plants that operate in Mexico. Very different than what was in the United States. There were the EU inspected plants. That would be the equivalent of our Dallas Crown, our Cavell, our Beltex. Now, those are TIF plants. That's federally inspected plants. But there are also dozens of other TIF plants. So the EU plants have become TIF plants, but the TIF plants aren't all weren't all EU plants. Those are federally inspected, and when they realized this was coming down, Mexico made a big effort to get other countries to accept their inspections as being legitimate. Then there are regional plants. Now, a regional plant is run by the regional government, and it's sort of a service. You bring your cow in. They don't buy cows. They don't buy horses. They don't buy goats. You bring your animal in on a certain day when they're slaughtering that kind of animal, and only certain plants slaughter certain kinds of animals. But you bring it in, and they slaughter it and package it up for you and give it back to you for a fee. So it's very different. They're not going to go up to the border buying horses. And then there's the private plants. Private plants are where you see the wonderful practices like the punta method, where they sever the spine and slaughter the animal fully conscious. Now, we looked at the percentage of the horses they were slaughtering. Now, this is in the EU plants. This is not in all plants. They were slaughtering 87% American horses, U.S. horses, and only 13% from Mexico. So that's going to tell you that that's going to have a big impact. About 100,000 horses went over the border in 2014. This is my favorite chart. It always ends up in every talk I give, and it's always updated. It's always online at our place. Notice that the red bar components were the U.S. plants when they were slaughtering, and they dropped off in 2007. And Mexico began to gain ground, but at first Canada was larger. Then Mexico took over, and the last few years, Mexico has been at least 2/3 of all of our horses that go to slaughter. Now, it's interesting to look back to 2005, just before we closed our plants, and look at how the different exporting countries rank. Canada, if you can be proud of this, Lonnie, you know, could you play the national anthem for us or something? Leader of the pack is Canada. Mexico second. Argentina and Mexico are about now, Poland, they slaughtered a lot of horses. Mostly what they were slaughtering at this time was the draft horses and sending them to Italy. And then you get down to France. Even though France is a consuming nation, a lot of these are both consumers and exporters. Now, here are the places that buy horse meat or bought it in 2005. Notice Italy is the biggest purchaser of horse meat, and that's pretty much still true. Belgium, Russia, France. Now, what's interesting is we were looking at what will happen when you cut off the EU countries and you say they can't buy it anymore from Mexico. What countries are left for them to be their market? There aren't many. You know, marking through. Now, there is a new one on here. Vietnam has come in since 2005. So we did an in-depth study of 2014. This is where all the meat went in 2014 from the Mexican plants. You will see the blue ones are all directly EU, but Switzerland goes by EU rules, so that really should be shaded blue. And then you've got Vietnam, Russia, Hong Kong, and Japan. Everybody talks about China. China is part of a sliver that you can't even see down here. There was a sliver other. Let's see, yeah, somewhere around in there, and I just took it out because it looked too strange. Russia should I must admit, be about twice as big as that. The reason it's half is because Russia had a ban on horse meat starting in the summer of 2013 and going through the summer of 2014. So half of 2014, Russia couldn't import it. So they were more significant. The people that think that this is all going to be okay for slaughter people are counting on Russia and China. China's not a player, and Russia has a real problem with its ruble. Its ruble has been devalued by about 50% in the last year. So now, if you look at the markets that go away for the plants in Mexico, that's them. So we anticipated out of all of this in an article in New Zealand Horse Talk that there'd be about a 35–40% reduction. So here were our anticipated scenarios on what they would do to try to keep things up. First, they would promote the TIF plants, which we found out they had already been doing. And they would try to bring in the other customers, which is what esteemed authorities on the other side are always talking about, China and Russia. The parent companies, we thought, might try to juggle. In other words, they have Uruguay producing horse meat, but sending it to one place. Maybe they can send Uruguay's horse meat to the EU and then send the horse meat to the other customer from Mexico. This didn't turn out to really work too well for them because there were just so few customers left when you took away the EU plants. And we thought, well, maybe Mexico will try to dump the meat domestically, but we knew that they don't get much money for it there. So that's not gonna be a good, profitable, long-term thing. Phase two, we ran down to the border to watch. And like I was telling somebody the other day, you know, when all of our sins come to roost, he asked me if I was stockpiling stuff in my bunker, you know, for the great dying that we're about to cause. I said, oh no, I'm eating beer and chips, I want to watch. So you know, we went down to Eagle Pass to watch this great event. Talk a little bit about our investigators always work undercover. They really are masters of disguise. You see here, one of our investigators is having her disguise checked by this nice lady with the pretty black hair. Pretty effective, actually. These are two investigators you don't want to mess with. One of them is a trained animal investigator, and the other one is a trucker that you know, has a commercial license and knows all about trucking rules. The first thing they found was bones in a Kaufman Park, so your wonderful town can't get away from it ever. Right behind a kill buyer's place, they reported them. Then they found an illegal dump of bodies where this guy was just taking them out on this property and dumping them in the open. By the way, Susan, that wonderful description you gave of the horse slaughter business, I wish I could memorize that because you hit it all. It's every bit of it, every aspect, top, bottom, left, right, everything that touches horse slaughter turns to garbage. They found donkeys in the kill buyer's lot. Now, they started looking at the lots on the way to the border. This is interesting because we don't see a whole lot of donkeys. You know, I mean, we see them going to slaughter, but this would turn out to be a theme. When they got down to the border, there were donkeys all over the place, and there are donkeys right now, and people are saying, what's going on with the donkeys? Why are there so many donkeys going to slaughter in Mexico? We don't have an answer to that right now. We don't know where they're coming from. Our investigators looked and couldn't find any markings from the BLM, so we don't know where they're coming from. It could be something like the Big Bend Reservation if they finally figured out a way to catch their donkeys. Of course, then there's some of the horses down at Eagle Pass. This one always haunts me, 3561. When I'm looking at the statistics later on, you know, so many crates of horse meat and horse tendons, I always see this picture. And I know one of those boxes, one of the things I looked at was this horse. Horses are transferred to Mexican trucks. They go from there to a holding lot and from there to the slaughter plants. They're supposed to have 6-hour rest. They don't. They filmed these donkeys in the back. I'm not going to run the video, but they filmed donkeys in this trailer, and they were stomping one in the back. And our investigators put this on YouTube, so you're welcome to watch it. They got the attention of the driver. He went back there, prodded around a little bit, but being cowards they are, they wouldn't go in and do anything. They're afraid they'd get their toes stepped on. So they left the donkey stomped and drove off. We got blamed. A lot of advocates said, why didn't you do something? Sorry, you know, I didn't bring my badge. We don't have any power at all to do anything except report. Now, you wonder why things are so corrupt at the border. Why did we find so many violations at the border, or just of the rest? There's a requirement that they have 6 hours rest before they be reloaded in the trucks. None of them were getting 6 hours rest. And so our people were reporting one after another. Well, this car drove in, and this gentleman on the right got out, started acting very official. Does anybody recognize him yet? Here's another picture of him. Yep, Joey Astling. He's the APHIS inspector. He's the one that makes sure that they obey all of the humane slaughter laws. And the car he drove into was registered. Of course, our people can run license tags and do just amazing things. It was licensed to El Retiro Livestock. And who's the CEO? This distinguished gentleman. Yes, and that is a mugshot. So our esteemed inspector is running around in a car belonging to the kill buyer, who's also a criminal. You know, what does that tell you about APHIS? Results of the investigation, they filed complaints against Trent Ward for illegal dumping. Someone else had already filed a complaint. Multiple violations of the rest time. I think there were 6 under 9 CFR 88. One blind horse rejected by Mexico. That's always the one they saw, but there were others, I'm sure. And they documented the donkeys being trampled, and the local authorities took no action whatever. But the most important thing they went down there for was what's happening to the flow of horses, and it didn't change. It went on as usual. And we're going like, ugh. So we started watching the data afterwards. The horses, we looked at horses being exported to Mexico, that's gazoon in, and then the horse meat shipments through U.S. ports, which we hoped would represent gazoon out, as we call it in engineering terms. And all horse meat shipments from Mexico eventually, we had to go to that, I'll show you why. And then the Mexican customs records. We looked at all this and cross-referenced it, and what we basically found is you can't really count on Mexican government documents. I know that's going to come as a shock. I know a lot of you are going to be disappointed that you were counting on that, but no, they don't. The numbers don't jive up. The columns don't jive. Okay. Now we have a great data researcher. In this case, it's the one on the left. I'm not sure if he's dating one of our investigators or not. That's Daniel Cordero Fernandez. Any of you who remember the very earliest anti-slaughter board that I was ever a part of called Until They're Safe. It was a little Yahoo group. Daniel was on that along with a lot of the people you see here now, you know. That was the seminal starting group for that I was ever involved with. And of course, Mary Nash was in there. She was the one that really got things going. So we started watching, and the green line is 2014, so the red line we want to watch, was it above or below 2014? It should be way below. And for the first 10 weeks, we said, that don't look right. No change, really, basically. And that was based, then we decided to look at the horse meat going out of Mexico. And we based it on a database that we had access to, which was imported data into the U.S. Now that sounds strange, but almost all of their exports go through U.S. ports. So they show up as an import to the U.S. and then an export back out of that same port. And look, now did that jive with what you just saw? The shipments, each of these little bubbles was a shipment. And, you know, there's lots and lots of them. On the 29th, there were a whole bunch of them. Some of these we believe were illegal. It was an attempt to get it in because they had a March 1st deadline to actually get to the destination. Then you see only this handful of exports. So our reaction, you know, we being all very intellectual and all, we had a considered opinion, a considered reaction to it, which was, gazoon in and no gazoon out. That again is one of our folks. So the possible explanations: the plants were selling the meat domestically, and you know we didn't believe that because we didn't think they could make enough money at it. They were selling the meat on the black market, turning it into beef, which they did in 2013 in Europe. That they were stockpiling inventory, that is horses, but they eat, so you don't want to stockpile horses. They were stockpiling finished goods, that's horse meat, but that goes bad after a certain period of time, so there's limits to that. Or the plants had stopped shipping through U.S. ports. They had found a way to get the meat there directly without the hub and spoke system. Or some combination above. So we decided we needed a better database, but about that time, I was asked to give this talk, and my original this is the original title I had to the talk, because at the time we still had this big question mark. It was Mexican Horse Slaughter, an Enigma, wrapped in a mystery, wrapped in an all-beef burrito. We didn't know what they were doing with it. Anyhow, at this point, we needed a better database, so we bought into a very expensive one called Panjiva. The Panjiva database will tell you everything that goes out of a country to eliminate the possibility that they had changed their shipping. And the problem with Panjiva is it's not only very expensive, you get a certain number of searches, And if you want to export a search to your Excel spreadsheet, it uses one search for each line. So, 10 lines would cost you about $180. So instead, we did copy and paste, which is what El Cheapo people do. This is, this is what a record looks like. And this was my job, to sit there and copy and paste these things hour after hour after hour. And you get the description. It's frozen horse meat, forequarter, hind quarter also in there. I wouldn't copy a lot of the nonsense. Then there's the date. There's where it's going, and that's who's receiving it. Then who is sending it, and how many pieces there are, usually, and how many kilograms. Now remember, a kilogram to get pounds, you multiply by 2.2. So that's a lot of horse meat. One of these shipment documents you see here is about 18 pallets of horse meat. And so we put these into an Excel spreadsheet, one by one, very laboriously. And we did graphing from that. Aha! Now bear in mind, some weeks have passed. The shipments had, in fact, crashed right after January. They had lost their business. Now, they might be sending it somewhere inside Mexico, but it won't go out on any ships. So now, 6 weeks later, we ran the graph again. And there it goes. Heading down, 40% down in the last few weeks. Now, no guarantee it can't pop back up again. Strange things happen in this business. But if for the year, it's only down about 18%. But if you look at the trend, if this trend keeps up, it'll be down about 40%, which is what we had originally gone on record as saying we thought would happen. I don't know how we got it right, but we did. The plants that were shipping before the ban were these plants. Some of them after the ban only shipped one shipment, but this one didn't ship any at all. And a Dutch company went out of the business of, they have these parent companies in the EU, and one of the Dutch companies just gave up and stopped shipping altogether. So the conclusions: the EU ban has had a devastating impact on the export of horse meat. This is only beginning to translate into a major reduction of the horses going to Mexico. Stopping horse slaughter is like nailing, well, I started off to say Jello to a tree. And then given, Karen's explanation of what the market really is like, the industry really is like, and being in the back of my mind, I thought, Jello is way too nice. This is like nailing horse crap to a tree. And to win, you need a lot of work, and you've heard this already from the first two speakers: work, perseverance, and a lot of nails. Yeah. And we're all nails. Having said that, it doesn't hurt if you have a nail gun, and I think we have a nail gun in Victoria. So, do I have any questions?
Can I just real quick?
Yeah, sure.
I forgot, because I think it's important. When I was mentioning the rejects, I want you all to know that the very same reasons that the horses were rejected at the Mexican border are the very same reasons that horses were, where there were citations for violations to the humane transport laws in 2005 at Dallas Crown and Beltex. The very same reasons. There's nothing sacred about U.S. soil. The sickness, injuries, blindness, lameness, lacerations, cuts, all those are the very same things that we saw in that 906-page FOIA document with over 400, maybe it was 700, I can't remember anymore, photographs of horses in dire straits for one 11-month period in 2005 in Kaufman and in Fort Worth. Those are the very same injuries that were are cited on the documentation at the export pens here this past year. So there's nothing about U.S. soil that makes it okay. I just want to be sure, okay? Thank you.
That's absolutely true. We weren't looking at rejects in this particular case, but we have looked in the past. There used to be a database on the Mexican side online listing all the rejects. There were about 9,000 rejects a year out of 100,000 horses. So this 10% is not something that's just happened in recent weeks. It's been ongoing. In fact, there were a whole lot of horses found, carcasses found just inside the border that had been dumped there, and they all had slaughter tags on them. They were all rejects. It's no good for you anymore, just dump it outside the road. You know, and they claim we're the ones causing abandonment and abuse and neglect. You know, everything is turned around, everything is painted. Yeah.
And also,
Yep.
Amarillo.
Yep.
Dumping them in the desert 40 miles from water.
Yep.